Dear Peter, on behalf of the Decision Analysis Society, I hereby congratulate you with the Frank P. Ramsey Medal, the highest award of the Decision Analysis Society. The medal was named in honor of Frank Plumpton Ramsey, a Cambridge mathematician and one of the pioneers of decision theory in the 20th century. Medalists are recognized for the important contributions they made to decision theory and its applications to real-world problems.
Thank you very much, Han. I'm very happy with this prize, so thanks a lot. So I am very happy with this Ramsey Research Award. One reason is that it comes from the Decision Analysis Society, which is the group of people with ideas closest to my own. I hope to explain that to the audience in the rest of my speech. But the name Ramsey that was added to this reward makes me even more happy, because Ramsey, I admire him very much. Many people know Ramsey died at the age of 26. He had written 5 small papers that all became big classics in their field, and his 31 paper was in our field, decision analysis. The first half of that paper, up to the theorem and the page after, is really brilliant. The rest of that paper, Ramsey could not finish during his life, so a friend of his finished it. We are ever grateful to the friend for having done so. But he could not write at the level of Ramsey, so that text is a bit more difficult. But the first half of the paper is really brilliant. Ramsey showed there how you can justify the use of probabilities, subjective probabilities, by basing them on decisions, on preference relations. That idea in itself already, he immediately saw it. It defines our field. It was the birth of our field, you can say. Well, preference relation, decisions, it's a subtle concept. It requires counterfactual thinking. To understand what a preference relation means, you must not only think about what really happens after you do what you do, but you have to think about what would have happened had I done something different than I do. It requires counterfactual thinking in that sense. Preference relation also is a sort of a disposition. It doesn't just say what you do, but it says what you would do in all kinds of situations, how your situation is. This subtle idea of preference relations, the best and most mature text that I know about it, that explains it better than anybody else has ever done, is the Ramsey 31 paper, the first half of it. So I advise every person in the field, especially young people, to read that text. The metaphors, everything is so marvelous. It really, after that, you understand better than you did before. You don't know why, because Ramsey has insight. We don't know why he writes what he writes, but he can really change our brains. This is a divine piece of work that we should cherish and everybody should study. So now you understand why I'm so happy to get a Ramsey Prize. The medal hasn't yet arrived. It will come by mail. It will be in my office, and it will make my office way more beautiful than it is now. We are right now in my office. Much to my regret, I cannot attend the conference. I cannot be with the audience. Usually I cannot attend other years because this is my teaching period. Well, for this prize I would surely have come, but now I have an injury to my foot and I still cannot come. So I regret much. I have to be in my office and speak to you on video, which is what I do now. Telling you a few things about my work. I'll start with my birth. I was born as a Bayesian. The main purpose of my professional life is to convert all of mankind to become Bayesians. Well, all of mankind, that surely includes all the statisticians. Bayesianism has a lot of useful things to say in statistics. That's where I came from. I started as a statistics student. I was taught statistics in the classical sense, the frequentist, hypothesis testing, level of significance, power, unbiased estimators. These things look silly to me. I thought, this is play with numbers. I don't see that it has much to do with inference. One day our teacher taught us that you cannot assign a probability to life on Mars, he said. Life on Mars is a unique event. Either it happens or it doesn't. You cannot assign a probability to it. I immediately felt amazement. It seemed to me life on Mars or a few flips of a coin is the same kind of uncertainty. we have to make decisions, it is uncertainty for us. There's no fundamental difference. So I went to my teacher, I told him about my amazement. My teacher told me, in his words, he said there was, quote, a crazy, as he said, Italian called De Finetti, who had ideas like I had. So maybe I should look at De Finetti if these things interest me. So I did, I went to the library. Now I was lucky that I hit on the 72 book of De Finetti and I read his first chapter, because that is an inspiring chapter. This lecture will not always be smooth, I will sometimes say critical things. And De Finetti is a deep thinker, many important innovations, but not all his ideas were very good. Sometimes he was confused. Not every paper by De Finetti is inspiring, but the first chapter of his 72 book surely is. And I was lucky to hit on that chapter, read that as one of the first things. Immediately I understood this is something I want to work on. This is great, this makes sense. So I started working on it. One thing I worked on was the book-making argument that De Finetti explained there. Now, second negative thing in my speech, many descriptions of the book argument in the literature I do not like so much, because they always emphasize that you should not violate monotonicity, you should not take a sure loss. But that is trivial, you need not emphasize that. The critical content of every book-making argument, they always use combinations of decisions to get you into sure loss, and how they combine your decisions, that is the critical aspect of every book argument. That they should discuss and emphasize. In De Finetti's case, the combination of actions and preferences was linear combinations, additions, multiplications. Those combinations only make sense if utility of money is linear. So that is the critical aspect of De Finetti's bookmaking argument that we should discuss. And one of my first research ideas and papers was to generalize De Finetti to relax that linear utility assumption. It led to a condition that I nowadays call trade-off consistency, that gave expected utility and subjective probabilities without this linear combination operation. Of course, the condition is more difficult. Well, you have a more difficult model. But that was one of the first things I did, a generalization of De Finetti. It was the beginning of my work. I worked a lot in the same direction, axiomatization or preference foundation is a nicer term, of decision models. And I had in mind my main purpose to convert mankind to become Bayesian. That was a prescriptive motivation. But also it can be used descriptively. You can study empirically how people really behave and use preference foundations to see how to test and to see what the bad properties of that is. I did a lot of that. So many of my papers are on non-Bayesian models. Then always the motivation is purely descriptive. And especially interesting is to see how these descriptive models deviate from the normative models. Then we see where people don't do best decisions, where we can help mankind improve, which direction mankind should move to become Bayesian. So that is a very interesting thing, fits completely with my main motivation I told you a moment ago. Nowadays, most of my work is on using prospect theory, that is a descriptive theory. Using that for ambiguity means unknown subjective probabilities, but psychological ways people handle is different than probability. That is my main research interest today. But I will not tell much more about it. Rather, do I want to use my time and your attention, your precious attention, to give some suggestions for the future of our field, the future of decision analysis. I will take decision analysis in a sort of narrow sense, that it comes directly from Savage, De Finetti, Ramsey, the normative justifications of expected utility. That was the birth of our field. Things close to that. From that point of departure, I want to suggest new directions, maybe changes. And I will say a few critical things about things written in the decision analysis literature. To explain my point, I start with a thought experiment. Imagine that you ask somebody, what does it mean to be rational? What is the meaning of rationality? Now imagine that person who you ask is a dietitian. That means somebody who knows about nutrition, healthy food. All his life he studied what is healthy food. He will answer the question probably saying something like, rationality means that you have the right composition of food. Vegetables, fresh food, whatever you think is healthy, he will tell you. That is being rational. If you eat good food, you will be healthy, your professional life will be good, your social life will be good, you will not be so aggressive. If all of mankind does it, maybe no more wars. So really the solution to all problems and to rationality is good food. I assume that nobody here is working on food. So everybody here will find that a very narrow answer. This is a person who all his life worked on one topic and he's completely blind. He doesn't know how much there is outside of his own topic. So this is a narrow-minded answer. But I'm afraid that we find this narrow-minded answer in many fields, almost all fields. If you ask a game theorist, what does it mean to be rational? He will say, you have to think about what your opponents can do, think about your best reply, find the best Nash equilibrium, then you are rational. This overselling happens relatively much in neuroscience, neuroeconomics, neuropsychology. For instance, there is a popular book, it appeared a few years ago by a prominent person. It is called We Are Our Brains. Now, after the examples I gave you, I hope you immediately understand that that title already suggests a narrow frame of mind. So it's not a title that I would like to have in my CV. So that's a third negative thing I say in my lecture, but so it is. Now I'm afraid that in our field, decision analysis, we also find this narrow view. If you ask a decision analyst, tell me, what is the meaning of rational? The typical answer is, list all the uncertain events, list all the outcomes, determine probabilities, utilities, maximize expected utility. Some people may add that the structuring of the problem is most of the work, the quantification is a smaller part, but still, this is the typical answer of a decision analyst. And I'm afraid, I think, this is just as narrow as the other examples I gave you before. We should not give such narrow answers. We should be open-minded to many things in life that are different than decision analysis. Telling a little bit more about my own work, my applied experience comes from 8 years in hospital, medical decision-making. The health field is a good field for decision analysis. It's quite typical, a patient comes with symptoms, you don't know exactly what he has, have to choose one of available treatments, the outcome will come, quite the framework of decision analysis. Still, even in the health domain, I quickly learned that after 999 out of 1,000 diseases, within 5 minutes you can say that decision analysis doesn't have any help to offer. Even if it's decision under uncertainty, our particular techniques of comparing decisions with other decisions, conditions, trade-offs, have no use in such cases. Only in 1 out of 1,000 diseases, our whole field and our techniques can be a little bit of use. Not so very much. The bigger thing is the health aspect, medical knowledge, but our field, our techniques can bring some improvement. I don't know if you find this a depressing thought that only in so few cases of decision under uncertainty our field has help to offer. But half empty can also be called half full, or 1 of 1,000 full. If you think about it, this is quite good. If you are working on something, if in 1 of every 1,000 diseases you can help really, you can offer something useful, then you're doing something very useful. It's useful enough for me to spend all my life working on this field, and for many people who are here, the same thing. This is our field. This 1 out of 1,000 decision situations in which our field can be useful includes several aspects of statistics. The statistical model has these things, the parameters, the statistics that you observe, the decisions to take. It's quite the framework of decision theory. So our field has important implications for statistics. For instance, Savage's sure thing principle, it's a rationality condition, most people here will agree with me. For statistics, that means the likelihood principle, and that means you shouldn't violate it. Now, almost all of classical statistics, hypothesis testing, unbiased estimation, they violate the likelihood principle. So within 5 minutes, you can see that these are not very sensible manipulation of numbers. These things should not be done. Now, that's already quite useful. There's more than 1,000 times human activity where we have nothing to say, but this is one activity where we have a big message to bring. So may all the statisticians become Bayesian. that alone is already enough to spend all your life working on. We need much more than one human life to convince all the statisticians. Question may be asked now. In most situations, as I said, decision analysis had no use. So which of the axioms say that you should always do exactly the difference, so which of the axioms is violated then? Well, not the sure thing principle, that's a good condition we should always satisfy. The main culprit of the axiom, almost never satisfied, is completeness for a rich continuity structure. That is assumed in almost every axiomatization theorem result in the literature. That is never satisfied in practice. We don't know so many preferences. We don't have the time to decide on a continuum of preferences. It takes infinite much time, a waste of our time. We do not do it, we cannot do it. That means that you cannot take the preference axiomatization and the theorems literally. Much more can be said about it, but at any rate, that is a reason. In most practical situations, we don't have enough richness of structure to use those operations that define decision analysis, comparing some trade-offs with other trade-offs, do those kind of things. Most situations, we just don't have that information. It's not enough relevant. We better do other things. 1 of 1,000 it is, and that's enough to make this a very useful field. An example of an implication of completeness is the claim that for every uncertain event, we should assign a subjective probability to it. Often it's said that Bayesian thinks so. That's an implication of completeness, so that is not a convincing, I think we should not adhere to that. Likelihood principle, yes. Subjective probability for every irrelevant uncertainty, no. Now I want to discuss a bit a paper that was written by Ralph Keeney, one of the grandfathers of our field, in 2004 in the journal Decision Analysis. By the way, we can be very happy to have this journal, a journal for our own field. It's doing very well, great impact factor, it's great. So let us cherish it and work more for it. Let's be happy. Many reasons to be happy today. Keeney wrote about the status of decision analysis. In the beginning, he agrees with something I said, being that in 1 out of 1,000 situations, the techniques of decision analysis are used in a normative sense as we have in mind. But then he goes on to argue, and now it's something I disagree, he argues that we should increase that percentage. Maybe he suggests that we should come to 1 out of every 10 situations that decision analysis, our techniques, can really be useful. Here's something, I see it differently. I think it's 1 over 1,000 and no more than 1 over 1,000. We should keep it at that. Suggesting more means overselling. I don't think we should say that our field decision analysis is useful for every decision. No, only for very particular. 1 over every 1,000 diseases, a few situations. But that's good enough. Then we sell our product as it is, then we don't lose customers, we get the right amount, we should do that. So this is one direction of the future of decision analysis. I think we should be modest, see where our techniques can be applied and stick with that, not oversell. It has given many negative reactions, people arguing that intuitive is better than analytic, all these things. They're talking about those 999 out of 1,000. We can avoid those discussions. They are right, only 1 out of 1,000. Another direction that can lead to improvement is if the field of decision analysis takes more notice of behavioral theories. Those are theories empirical, using much psychology, seeing what people really do. In those 1 out of 1,000 situations in which we can use our techniques, people are still doing very different things than our models. So much that they don't fit in our normative models easily. So we should work more on models that fit the real decision, then we know what is to be improved. And a classic model that started this direction was prospect theory, giving quantitative estimations of the irrational behavior. I think decision analysis needs to reckon more with those things, to model real behavior and to see how people can be improved. That brings me to one of the greatest decision analysts today, in my opinion, that is Dick Thaler. He is not traditionally considered to be a decision analyst, but he does what is the future of the field, seeing how people behave psychologically, where it deviates from optimal models, and understanding very well how he can move people in the direction of better decisions. So that is something very useful. Judge Lewenstein also does much of that. That is really, I hope that decision analysis will incorporate more of those ideas. It is also the other way around, because the behavioral field, behavioral economics mostly, they lack all kind of techniques of decision analysis. In decision analysis, there's more quantitative sophistication, There's a team of Ron Howard who is doing much consultancy work in the industry, multi-attribute utility optimization. All these things, decision analysts are way more advanced, and the behavioral stream can benefit from more knowledge of that. So I think merging these fields and techniques coming together is what I think a good future direction of decision analysis. Well, as I said in the beginning, I'm happy. This is one of the happiest events of my life. Now that I explained how much my ideas fit with this community, maybe you understand better why anything, especially from this community, I'm very happy to have received this prize. One of the happiest events of my life. And therefore the ending of my lecture is a happy ending. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm very happy. Thank you.